Hi, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Allison, and welcome to Technical Difficulties. I apologize for this. There was just an issue with the Chrome browser and the Video Ninja program that we use, and I couldn't get things to share properly. So we started a bit late, but hopefully we'll make up time in the back stretch. I also have been working on maybe making this so I can have this read out by an AI voice so you don't have to listen to my broken pronunciations. But we'll see. We'll see. Didn't work today. A little bit too much to try. And I do want to do the thing. So if you would like to send me a message at any time throughout the show, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. That's the very best way to send me a message and also to send a tip with that message. So that's very much appreciated. You avoid YouTube's comment enhancement system, which you can consider a euphemism for whatever you like. And we get the full benefits of the funds here at Honey Badger Radio. Now, we are also doing our monthly fundraiser, which we do monthly, so that's probably not a surprise to anyone. And if you want to help out there, you can go to feedthebadger.com/support to help us out with that. And yeah, very much appreciated if you want to do that. And okay, so let us begin with this particular article. It is called "Confession: Casual Sex is My New Favorite Kind." It's actually pretty milquetoast on the surface when you get into it. But what's really fascinating is there's several moments where it's like the ground sort of feels a little soft, starts to feel like there might be a hole underneath this ground. And I ended up getting caught in one of those areas and tumbling down a rabbit hole of this woman's life. Now, I don't know if this woman is real. She could be an AI construct. She just popped out of the ether in like late 2023, so it's entirely possible. Anyway, her name is Jennifer Lily Jennifer Lily Mary, and she publishes quite a bit for the Virago. So let's take a look. What is the Virago? The Virago is a community of women who share our personal stories about how we've survived and thrived in our lives. So you can imagine this is a bunch of nebulous bullshit, but be it as it may, she's been publishing on the Virago her various exploits in life, and one of them is apparently recovering from being part of a purity culture. And what she means by that is she was Christian, supposedly at one point. We'll get into that later. All right, so let's read the article. Confession: Casual sex is my new favorite kind. I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. I don't think you know what I'm thinking. All right, a woman saying she enjoys casual sex likely brings a certain stereotype to mind. There's much to be said about that stereotype and those who hold it, but that's a different article. So for now, let's focus on how I'm defining casual sex. Yes, talking about a woman who enjoys casual sex brings to mind a woman who enjoys casual sex, just like talking about somebody who sets fires brings to mind the stereotypes around an arsonist, or somebody who steals brings to mind the stereotypes around a thief. But let's move on. Come to think of it, let's talk about the definition of sex. I'm not even slightly embarrassed to say I had to look this up to write this article. I was, however, disappointed to find this conventional definition hadn't shifted much in the 20+ years since I first asked my more experienced friend. Oxford Dictionary gives us the following. I have questions here. All right, so you don't remember the definition, but you know it enough to know it hasn't changed in 20 years. Okay, sexual intercourse, sexual contact between individuals involving penetration, especially the insertion of a man's erect penis into a woman's vagina, typically culminating in orgasm and ejaculation of semen. I actually think that definition has broadened since 20 years ago, but when I asked my friend, I was 19, I found myself not being sure if I was still a virgin. Because, the aforementioned, she was a Christian, part of a purity culture thing. Still, I'd been dating my boyfriend for over a year, and I was pretty sure I wasn't. Still, hope compelled me to ask to seek confirmation. And I still remember the crushing pressure in my chest as I waited for her to answer. A dick going in and out of a pussy. So this woman had to ask what sex was in order to determine whether or not she was no longer a virgin. Are Christian communities really that bad about things like this? So I have a bit of a question mark on my, on the top of my head here. My friend's definition was perhaps less clinical. Oh, by the way, that rabbit hole I mentioned earlier, we're going to be going down it because there is a lot. This seems like it's all very, very surface level, very meaningless, but there's a lot behind this woman's story and what she's been up to. My friend's definition was perhaps less clinical than Oxford's, but no more forgiving. Forgiving. This definition of sex is not forgiving. Okay, that's just, why would you need your definition of sex to be forgiving? What would be a forgiving definition of sex? Oh, well, maybe she's meaning like a definition of sex that excludes whatever she did so she could remain a Christian virgin. My heart sank. I wasn't supposed to have sex. I had failed. And so that's what sex became. Penetration followed by shame. It's really hard to understand what the hell she's talking about. I don't know if it's just me. I know I'm autistic. I can be pretty literal, confused by certain nuances, have difficulty reading the room. But what the hell does she mean by this? Is she honestly proposing that she didn't know she had sex? She found out from her friend, and then she felt guilt about it because she just sort of accidentally sex? I just fell into it by accident. Didn't know what I was doing. Are Christian communities that confused? Okay, sex before marriage was against God's will. So she accidentally had sex before marriage, accidentally, mind you. She didn't even know until she learned the definition of sex because her religious upbringing was so strict. So strict. They didn't even explain what to avoid. All right. And now she's discovered it, and now everything is shame. Sex before marriage was against God's will. I wanted to have sex because it felt good. So, all right. Okay, so at this point, so when you had the sex, you knew it was sex. I rationalized. So are you delusional? Were you like, okay, well, I think that was sex, and I wanted to have it, and I'm pretty sure it was sex, but maybe my friend will give me an out. I rationalized that I was going to marry him anyway. What was the difference if we had sex before or after we signed some paperwork? Besides, we dated for 6 years because he didn't want to rush into marriage. He wanted to do it right once or something like that. Oh, there's more to that story, by the way, guys. This guy was clawing to get out of this relationship. So we had sex, but unfortunately, it came at a price. Sex for me was always full of tension. Okay, but you just said that the first time or however many first initial times that you had sex, you didn't even know what you were doing. So why would there be tension over shame, not knowing what you were doing? I guess you assumed that it was something sexual, something wrong. But this is the problem with a lot of these articles from places like Virago. It's so vague. It's like this particle, like this cloud of particles that you can't just, what are you trying to say? So we had sex, but unfortunately it came at a price. So you knew you had sex when you had sex because you knew it was, anyway, my body was doing its best to guard itself from the intense weight of the shame, which started when your friend told you what sex was, but apparently also started when you first had sex. Okay. A built-in undercurrent of resistance. That tension became synonymous with sex. If it's hard to imagine enjoying sex under those circumstances, then you'll have arrived at that point. This sounds like somebody's making up an excuse for something, really. Okay, because it like you initially you didn't know what you were doing, but you were enjoying it. So it's sort of like a Blue Lagoon situation. And you're just completely innocent, enjoying the pleasure, and then suddenly here comes your friend with the bad news. You've been having sex this entire time. And then as a Christian, from a strict religious upbringing, who essentially your parents allowed you to just hang out with this guy like this, but whatever, and move in with him. And then you suddenly realized, oh, I should be feeling ashamed. I would frequently cry after having an orgasm, which of course led me to Google crying after orgasm more times than I care to admit. No, this is not shame. You're just a woman. Google supplied that other people experience this emotional release, so I never thought to look deeper. I just slowly started to avoid sex or anything that could lead to sex. By the way, at this point in time, she's married to a man, so there's another human being being taken on Jennifer's wild ride. Penetrative sex is no longer the standard. 20 plus years later, I have thankfully expanded my definition of sex. While it was most definitely, well, maybe if you'd expanded it earlier, you would have realized you were having it. Well, it was most definitely can include a dick going in and out of a pussy. That's about the most narrow definition I can imagine, not to mention heteronormative as fuck. And it comes straight out of the sex negative religious cultural narrative I was taught. So basically, it sounds like you got rid of one religion and religious attitude toward sex, and now you've adopted another. It turns out that despite what Oxford, Webster, the church, and my parents offered, the definition of sex is largely subjective. Is it though? And if it is subjective, why are you so shamed by it? So what do I consider sex now? Sex is any consensual activity that involves physical or mental stimulation for the purpose of experiencing sexual pleasure. So there you have it, folks. Masturbation is sex. Watching porn is sex. Reading Danielle Steele is sex. Broadening my definition of sex radically shifted my relationship to my sexuality, but also made me re-examine my sexual history. According to this new definition, I had sexual relationships before losing my virginity, and much, if not most, of the penetrative sex I did have in my marriage was not, in fact, strictly consensual. I don't recall even hearing the words consent talked about in the context of sexual relationships, but when I did as an adult, I thought consent just meant not saying no. Yet another definition in need of an update. What do I look for now is enthusiastic consent. So because she didn't give retroactively enthusiastic consent to her husband, he's now a sexual abuser. Is there any way he could have known? No way at all. He's got no chance in all of this. I don't, everybody knows what enthusiastic consent is. Enthusiastic consent is the newer model for understanding consent that focuses on a positive expression of consent. Simply put, enthusiastic consent means looking for the presence of a yes rather than the absence of a no. Enthusiastic consent can be expressed verbally or through nonverbal clues such as positive body language like smiling. Enthusiastic. So you can express consent through nonverbal. Okay, maintaining eye contact and nodding. Except, guys, those things won't be accepted if she ever says you sexually assaulted her. They won't be accepted as evidence you didn't in a court of law. So just get contracts. Always be recording. Save those text messages. Apparently, even that doesn't help. Look at Neil Gaiman. He had all these text messages of these women, arranging to meet him again and saying, I'm looking forward to it. But apparently he is still a rapist. These clues alone do not necessarily represent consent, but they are additional details that may reflect consent. Isn't it funny how consent is this really ambiguous thing for women, but it's a really concrete thing for men? Like a concrete cell with iron bars. Must be nice to live in the land of the fairies. It is necessary, however, to still seek verbal confirmation. The important part of consent, enthusiastic or otherwise, is checking in with your partner regularly to make sure they are still on the same page. So she read this. She went from a sexual framework in which having sex outside of marriage was bad to a sexual framework in which you have to check in at every step because sexual activity is so potentially dangerous and fraught, destructively fraught. It's basically you're like defusing a nuclear bomb every time you have sex. That's definitely more healthy. The tension I felt around sex prevented me from engaging in this way. I was never enthusiastic about sex. How could I be? I never gave explicit consent and he never sought it out. The emotional damage this caused to both me and my spouse was brutal. Waking up to these truths destroyed our relationship, and the grief that still comes in buckets feels fit to drown me some days. Oh, she's putting a positive spin on what actually happened here, guys. You probably realize at this point that that's the case. Yeah, she's not the innocent party in all of this, like she's trying to pretend she is. And there's some sordid stuff happening here. Actually, just a second, I'm going to fix something. All right, let's get back into it. Now I have to find my tabs. All right, here we go. The emotional damage this caused to both me and my spouse was brutal. Waking up to these truths destroyed our relationship, and the grief that still comes in buckets feels fit to drown me some days. The freedom to enjoy my sexuality, despite my marriage ending and the considerable loss of that relationship, I'm happy to say that the healing I've experienced has been worth it. I'm on the other side, and the grass is so much freaking greener. Recently, after some lovely sex with my current partner, I found myself feeling incredibly grateful for the connection, yet I struggled to find words around why the relationship feels so impactful to me. It's just sex, I told myself. It shouldn't be that important. I noticed, however, that our coupling is devoid of the tension I used to feel around sex. There is an ease when we come together, and it's the result of the shared definition of enthusiastic consent and this expanded definition. Oh, crap. Sorry, guys. This expanded definition of enthusiasm, and this expanded definition of what sex is. Sex is what we make it, and it never looks like one particular thing. It's fluid and flexible. I feel freedom in it. When I was searching for the right word to describe it, what popped into my mind surprised me. It feels casual. If I had to laugh, if 18-year-old me knew I was enjoying casual sex by any definition, she would have been scandalized. Apparently, 18-year-old me didn't know what sex was. Didn't know what sex was. Didn't know that sex involved a penis going into a vagina. So as far as 18-year-old her knew, casual sex was riding the roller coaster together, like a roller coaster at a theme park together. And yet our sex is relaxed, friendly, natural, informal, and unpretentious. Outside the framework given to me in early adulthood, I feel no more shame. My biology sings, given a casual and consensual sexual context, giving into my sexual cravings. So it seems that after 22 years of being sexually active, I officially enjoy the hell out of some casual sex. And despite being what I thought, it's not devoid of intimacy, but rather rich with it. This is the kind of sex I romanticized all those years, but had no idea was possible, given the crushing shame I felt. Sorry, my mic seems to just want to creep down today. Give it a little bit of a angle. Maybe that'll keep it up. Hopefully my sound is okay. Tell me in the comments. Deconstructing from religion, naming my religious trauma, and reframing sexuality in a positive light have made a profound impact on my life. I'm forever changed in ways that I'm grateful for. Let's see, what was this written? This is important. February 22nd, 2024. She writes something very different in March 20th of 2025. But this is when she's hot in the high of the divorce, I'm guessing. Naming my religious trauma and refraining sexuality in a positive light have had a profound impact. I now crave sex for the intimacy I find there with my partner. I understand now that this intimacy was what was missing in my marriage, what my spouse had been seeking all those years. I couldn't give it to him because I did not have the capacity or the tools. I have a hard time engaging in sex without this established intimacy. I learned I can have sex outside these parameters, but I don't crave it. It's the intimacy I find attractive. Without it, sex feels like a mashing of genitals, devoid of eroticism and holds no appeal. It's wild to me that people experience sexual God, you're so long-winded. And here I am in an established relationship. Established is doing a lot of work here, guys, because yeah, there are details she's omitting and glossing over. I'm experiencing sexual attraction for the first time in my life at the age of 40. Good Lord. This shit is fire. 10/10, recommend. More than anything, I'm grateful that I finally got the opportunity to explore my sexuality, and what I found is pleasantly surprising, unexpected in the most delightful ways. Maybe to other people it's just sex, but to me, it will always be more than that, because the enjoyment of it is proof I have grown. Like discovering that I do, despite assumptions, prefer my sex casual. All right. So this seems on the surface to be very innocuous. I did want to find out more about this divorce and supposedly this man who was sexually abusive to her, or at least she's groping towards that conclusion. I think what happened is she wasn't always into it, but she still had it, and she's considering that retroactively to be sexual abuse. So I was curious about where this was coming from. And again, it seems pretty, it's very self-involved. It's very presumptuous. She sounds like an idiot, but it doesn't seem like it's too horrifying, right? It's just like, it's woman's got a woman, right? But no, so I wanted to look into more of what happened with her relationship, where that went wrong. And so we go back to November 30th, 2023. I think she's still married at this point, because in 2025, she said she divorced the previous year. So that would mean that she divorced in 2024. And she talks about how she went to Catholic school, and then she left Catholic school, and she was with a less controlled environment, a more, I guess, a public school where anything goes. And apparently her friends in public school drew on her wrist, and her father pulled her wrist out and said, if you let your friends draw on you, you'll never be able to say no to sex, which is possibly the most awkward and bizarre interaction. And again, this would probably have to be the worst incidence of shaming, because if there was something worse, that's what she would point out. Anyway, and also considering the previous article, or the article that we just read, how did she know what he was referring to? Like, she said, how will you say no to sex? Well, what's sex, Daddy? Like, is sex making a sandwich? Is it waxing the tabletop? Like, what is this thing that you're talking about? I don't know. And then this father who says that is okay later on with her shacking up with her boyfriend. No comments about that. I mean, you would think that would be when he would start saying something. I see that you are now living with a man. Yeah, those vows, anyway. So now as an adult getting into it, it's hard to look back and not see a much darker undercurrent and the parallels to the church's message. Consent didn't have anything to do with what I wanted, but it did imply a power structure, an external hierarchical power structure. First God, then my father. This power seemed to automatically transfer to my husband. So this is feminist claptrap. This left some severe gaps in my understanding of consent, and is the root of my religious trauma. When I met the man I would marry, I knew he was the one. I chose him. He was 22 and I was 18. I was very much the pursuer in the relationship, which was uncharacteristic for me. I was usually shy and reserved, but this felt like the most significant decision of my life, and I never met anyone like him. As forward as I was about pursuing him to date, sexually, I held back. I was uncomfortable with desire more than discomfort. I felt tremendous shame, not just with intercourse, but around my body. Okay, previous article. So she's holding back sexually, but how does she know that? Because she doesn't know what sex is. I mean, she ends up having sex, not knowing that it's sex. I think that this is just, when women write stuff like this, it's a particular type of woman, and they are so histrionic about what they're writing. Like they just really, they're like, oh, I hope so much that him putting his penis in my vagina wasn't sex. And then my friend dashed my hopes with her definition. Okay. All right. We try to push it further a little time before I said, okay, this is their sex life. More than discomfort, I felt tremendous shame, not just with intercourse, but also around my body. I was conscious of how I looked, felt, and moved. Anything that revealed I might want sexual attention felt like my body was betraying me, because it did feel good. Of course it did. I did my best to suppress the desire I felt, protested for a while, and tried to uphold my boundaries. Okay. We'd push a little further each time before I'd say we'd stop. I wanted the things that were happening, but that was the problem. It made me feel so dirty and wrong. I remember feeling distraught about it and asking my more experienced friend, this is another, what sex was, because I'd somehow thought I'd skirted the boundaries and it was still being good. A dick going in and out of a pussy was her crass reply. Okay, all right, so we're going to skip that. The problem was that the shame followed me. Not at first, or at least not as much. But by the time we got married, after 6 years of dating, there was already dissatisfaction in our sex life. I know this because every few years, my husband would bring up that he wasn't happy with the amount of sex we were having. I tried, I really did, but making yourself want something that's been ingrained in you as dirty, nasty, and wrong is quite a challenge. I didn't have any awareness that this was happening, was related to religious trauma until 15 years later. Is religious trauma like the new buzzword? Because it's the new thing, it's the new it. I just assumed that I didn't like sex and that I was broken. I started noticing patterns in my spouse. He always initiated, and I mostly wasn't in the mood. I would almost always rather be doing something else. 2 weeks or so was about the length of time it took for the lack of sex to affect his mood. He'd be withdrawn, sullen. I really doubt it's 2 weeks, guys. Probably months. I knew that if we had sex, I'd get my sweet, loving husband back. So once the guilt started to build up, eventually I'd get to a tipping point and know that I should have sex with him. Reset the calendar, give me a break from the tension I felt inside. The problem was, I think we both unknowingly bought into this narrative that as his spouse, I owed him sex and that I consented through marriage. If you're in a romantic relationship, barring actual physical disability, the sexual part should be a given. Like if you're dealing with trauma, fine. If you have physical inability, fine. But their will should be there, at least. And it sounds like it isn't. I laid there so many nights, gritting my teeth and repeating to myself, I'm not saying no, I'm not saying no. I thought I was consenting as long as I didn't say no. The first time I read about being able to violate your own consent, I was confused. But I understand now what it means. I wanted to say no, and yet I didn't. Okay, guys, this is the new thing. Women violating their own consent. So essentially women consenting, but not consenting in their minds or not consenting later, and they're violating their own consent. So this is going to be the new it that sweeps through all of the sewing circles. I didn't say no because I was afraid of the ramifications to my relationship. I didn't want my husband to be withdrawn, and I didn't want to keep feeling broken. So not saying no was not the same as consent. I think that bears repeating, so I'll indulge myself. Not saying no, especially in the face of relational consequences, is not the same as consent. And we're manufacturing a new bar that men have to jump through to escape out of the concrete cell. Every few years when the sex conversation came up, I would cry and privately resolve to try to have sex more often. The cycle ended when one night I opened my eyes in the dark to find him scrolling his phone, his face illuminated by the glow. Somebody wants to be a novelist but isn't creative enough. He looked dead inside. This was the end of 2020, so everything had been hard for months. I reached out my hand and asked what was wrong, and he crumpled in front of me. Our lack of intimacy is killing me, he cried. He used the word intimacy instead of sex. That I could relate to. I missed him dreadfully. He used to be happy and sweet and generous and caring. Now he didn't feel like any of those things. I missed the emotional intimacy we used to have We both cried, and I resolved yet again to figure out what the hell was going on with my lack of sex drive. I wanted to want sex. More than that, I wanted to stop damaging my relationship. This time I took a different approach. After all, if something is wrong, maybe it's something I can fix. I stumbled on research about how devastating the effects of hormonal birth control could be on libido and decided to stop using it. I was making all kinds of efforts in a desperate attempt to get in touch with my body. I read books about trauma that explain the mind-body connection in the nervous system. I found incredible healing in an at-home yoga practice that is to this day one of the sweetest gifts I've ever given myself. All this led me down a path of examining my relationship with pleasure and led to several revelations. And of course, she reveals that she was ashamed of her sexuality. All these years I'd been ashamed. To want even my husband, who I love dearly. In a blink of an eye, I saw the problem. Religion had taught me not to trust myself with my body. So she, again, exchanges the religious prohibition against sex prior to marriage. And honestly, at this point, shouldn't she be fine? Like, shouldn't she be like, oh, well, we're married, so we can do what we want. According to Christianity, it's okay in marriage. Maybe avoid sodomy, I suppose, but whatever, oral sex and that kind of stuff. Maybe they'll give a bit of a forgiveness for married people, but regardless, you would assume that sex itself would be fine now, but apparently that's not good enough. And she had to replace that with questioning her own consent. So what was it called? Violating her own consent. So she replaces not wanting to have sex prior to marriage with treating sex like diffusing a nuclear bomb. Such a vast improvement, huh? Anyway. Okay, so, and the other thing is she's not really being honest here. She's not completely telling us everything that her and her husband pursued. This is something that I didn't pick up until she dropped a bomb in here, overthinking sex, my favorite post-purity culture kink. All right. Despite the before she was describing her sexual awakening, that she realizes her religious trauma, regardless, presumably she's in a relationship, so it's fine now, but whatever. I think she just, for whatever reason, stopped finding her husband attractive. Maybe she got bored, but anyway, she says it was religious trauma. She got over it. Their sex life is vastly improved, and that's supposedly the only thing that they did. Despite the chaos and upheaval of a sexual awakening, of opening a marriage, followed by an emotional divorce and the deep pit of despair and loss I feel some days, okay, I found an anchor of trust in the wisdom of my body. So that was a detail that she failed to reveal. This Christian couple decided to have an open relationship. And that's when this entire story starts to unravel completely. Because later on, and I'm piecing together the timeline here, they have an open relationship. They get divorced in 2024, and I'll cover that because it's really interesting. And she's already in a 3-year relationship with her sneaky link. And I'm using relationship really loosely. She eventually admits that it is casual sex. She just basically calls him up and is like, yeah, you want to, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm dramatizing it in a sense, but there's not a committed relationship there. He is her sneaky link, and she's been having sex with him for 3 years. In 2025, which means, or actually 2024, which means sometime between her husband expressing his despair over their dead bedroom, the fact that she's not having sex with him at all, and them opening their marriage, or even prior to that, I wouldn't be surprised if she was boinking this dude prior to even suggesting that the marriage be opened. And I'm guessing that it was her that suggested it. She got into this relationship. So she's been in this relationship for 3 years, been only divorced for 1 year. And she's got religious trauma, huh? Maybe she needs a little more of it. But anyway, so she's been in a relationship with her sneaky link, and I pieced this all together over like 7 articles because she dribbles this out. And this is a bomb. Like, you opened your relationship. I'm guessing what happened is her husband was absolutely desperate to just revive his relationship. And she probably, I can't imagine him floating that. Let's have an open relationship. Maybe he did. And she agreed to it. And they decided to pursue other people. And she found her sneaky link. And I think that's the actual timeline of events here. That was her sexual awakening. And I mean, I guess it worked for a time because her husband actually got sex. And I wonder if one of the conditions of opening their relationship was her husband said, I want to continue to have a sexual relationship with you. Having an open relationship shouldn't replace that. I bet. That's what I'm guessing. That was a condition. So this Christian couple is now pursuing an open relationship in order to solve the problems of her religious trauma. The tangled webs we weave. All right. So that second article that I read was essentially her description. Let's go into the reason why she got a divorce. Because she's trying to frame this in a particular way. I've written a fair bit about the dissolution of my marriage, but it's official. I'm divorced. It's been almost 2 years since we initially separated, and I finally have the clarity that distance affords. There are plenty of reasons I could have ended my marriage. I rejected him. He didn't reject me. But the real reason I got divorced was pretty simple. He asked me for a divorce. So this guy asked her for a divorce. Now, again, let's keep the context in mind. Looks like it was an open relationship. She's already in a relationship with another man. She's most likely having sex with this dude. She's still with her husband. And I'm guessing that one of the conditions of this open relationship is that he still get to have a sexual relationship with his wife. The man I built my life around said he didn't want to be my husband. Red flags through rose-colored glasses. When you're desperate to be loved, it's amazing how many warning signs you can explain away. Each red flag becomes a challenge to overcome, a problem you can fix if you just try hard enough. Looking back, I can see that clearly. Her sex life was a train wreck. I don't know if it's fair to paint it simply as an incompatibility, since it was tainted from the beginning with trauma from my purity cultured background. From the start, we had a clear dynamic of mismatched desire. It wasn't simple, of course, but what led to it was a cycle of pursuing, avoidance, coercion, and yes, even sexual assault. Emotional avoidance. So she starts talking about the past where she was dating. This guy attempted to dump her like 4 or 5 times. Guys, trust your gut. You know, if you are dumping a woman, don't 3 or 4 times, don't marry her. Like, just don't let her pressure you into marriage. Don't let her family pressure into marriage, or you end up like this guy. So she talks about how he avoids conflict. And then we get into this. When my body said no, I learned to listen. Again, I think at this point, she's already having sex with another man in an open relationship, judging from all of the little hints she's dropping everywhere else. I finally began to unpack my religious trauma. I experienced a sexual awakening that should have been a fresh start for us, presumably the opening of their marriage. If the only problem in our relationship was that we weren't having enough sex, it would have been. Instead, it revealed what happened when I learned to say no. The moment I will remember forever, things were getting spicy in the kitchen, and he turned me around to push me against the counter where I was face to face with a knife. As you would be in a kitchen. I wasn't afraid he would use it. That wasn't it. But when I said I wanted to stop, when I said I didn't feel safe, something fundamentally shifted. For the first time, I was learning to listen to my body's signals to honor my need for safety. What I didn't expect was how my no would unravel us. As I tried to create a space to understand my sexual trauma, to process what I needed to feel safe, he got stuck in a different loop entirely. For months, he fixated on his own rejection trauma, needing me to validate his feelings before we could address mine. It probably means addressing his feelings at all, but he called me selfish for dismissing his needs. But what about mine? Presumably, you're getting those met by your sneaky link in your open relationship, which you fail to mention here. My body knew what my mind was still trying to deny, that this wasn't a healthy dynamic. Not that you were bored with your husband. No. Not that you were getting rogered on the regular with Pookie. I couldn't engage in intimacy without betraying the clear signs that something was wrong. I had begun one big trauma response. Except with the dude that isn't your husband, but I finally realized that a relationship had only worked for 20 years because I didn't have boundaries. Look, now that I was learning to set them, nothing worked. Okay, again, this guy attempted to break up with her several times in their initial dating life. All right. Oh, yeah, here she says, during the 5 years we dated, he tried breaking up with me. Oh, now my computer is frozen. I'm sorry, guys. I hope this is not terminal. He tried breaking up with me 3 times. He said he needed space. He never said what for or why, but I clung to him like a barnacle after a few days apart. So she's a lipid. And through her inability to take responsibility for her emotions and her, what are we listening to? We're listening to a bunch of hysterical, crazy making bullshit. She essentially hoovered him back into a relationship, and she's the one who's talking about breaking boundaries, him breaking boundaries. All right. Okay. I think that I may have to do a hard reboot. So, all right, let me just wrap this up. Okay. This is all bullshit, right? They opened their relationship. He probably asked her to continue to have a sexual relationship with him. She declined. She went off with her sneaky link. Her sneaky link probably left her sometime in early 2025, because in March of 2025, she starts talking about how women lose out in casual sex, and they lose out in these kinds of non-committed relationships. And she asks if men have anything to offer women except their penises. And then, so she goes on this long screed about how birds are better partners than men. So I'm guessing someone was dumped by their sneaky link, or even though she probably wasn't really asking for or maybe she did. Maybe she's like, I want a relationship now. And he's like, no, bitch. And then just a few months after that, another article in which her husband is now even more evil, more villainous over all of this. And what is completely absent is any sense of self-reflection, any sense that her own actions contributed to any of this. Geez, I don't even know if I'm continuing to be able to do this. I mean, everything's pretty much, goodness, let me see if I can. No sense that she contributed to all of this, that her complete lack of taking responsibility for her own emotional states and her actions. And then all of the stuff that just, what the hell does it mean you opened your relationship? How do you have a 3-year sexual relationship with a man 1 year after divorce? Like, all of this stuff suggests that there is a lot more to this story. Now, again, she could just be AI, or she could live in complete and utter solipsism. And probably the reason why her sneaky link left is he finally realized it. Okay, let me see if I'm actually still. This is really bizarre. Sorry, guys.
No, you're just closed the.
Yeah, but I can't. For some reason. Okay, no, I'm good now. Okay, thanks, Brian. Thanks for telling me, because I was about to restart everything, and that might have been a disaster. But yeah, so this is the story of Jennifer Lily Marie, healing from her religious trauma, and learning to love casual sex until it bit her in the ass. Actually, let's take a look at that really briefly, that one article. Ladies, we're screwed. Why dating and mating is clearly for the birds. Okay. All right. So she goes through the standard boilerplate about how men are frightening and whatever else. And then she talks about how birds are more loving, and she's like the bowerbird builds a nest and she can't even get men to take out the trash. And yeah, I'm guessing that somebody got broken up with. This is where she says she got divorced last year in 2025. And yet she's been in a relationship with this other dude for 3 years. All right. So I'm guessing that she's not coming out right and saying that he left, but I'm pretty sure he is. And then the next thing, ghosted when your 20-year spouse becomes a stranger. So this is detailing how her husband very understandably just ghosted her. Like, I mean, usually in a divorce, at least sometimes people will keep a tendril of contact, maybe a card at Christmas, maybe occasional phone calls to just see how you are. This man was like, no, you're blocked. You're gone from my life. And here's another little interesting tidbit that suggests that she was the problem all along. When she went to couples counseling with him, the female relationship counselor told him that he needed to get his own therapist, probably because he had things that he needed to address, and the things that he needed to address were her. Get a therapist so that you'll have somebody to lean on while you go through the inevitable divorce from this crazy making lunatic. So anyway, he actually did no contact. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a restraining order. And she has written multiple articles about her divorce and her husband. And she even, and again, we don't get to hear his side of the story. And there's only little tidbits that indicate that she was the wrecking ball in her own relationship. But anyway, I'll leave this, you can take a look at yourself. Her name is Jennifer Lily Marie. She writes for Virago and Medium. And yeah, very interesting stuff. A little bit of a rabbit hole. Okay, so I'm going to see if we have any. I'm going to see what my dog is doing. Get out of the trash. No, you do not have the trash is not yours. Out. Come on, out of it. Out. Does your dog enjoy trash?
You're
Brian?
telling me, Jojo?
Yeah.
He used to. Like, he would knock over the trash bin when we weren't home and dig into it, but he doesn't do that anymore. And plus, now we have like one of those trash cans that opens when you put your hand over the lid, like a sensor, so he doesn't bother trying to get in.
For some reason, my did I close it? That's why it's no longer showing? Or
yes,
am I not
sharing or close it or something? Yeah.
Oh, damn, sorry. That's a little bit confusing here. Here, let me just open it up again. Oh, okay, so that was the article I just shared. Confession. This is the first one. Then here are all of the rabbit hole articles where you start to piece together what actually happened in this woman's life. And of course, it's always the same thing. She happened to her own life, but she refuses to acknowledge it. Now she's in her mid-40s. She's lost her husband. She's lost her sneaky link. And she's starting to do the typical, she's going into her men are worth shit arc. And also apparently obsessing over her husband right here. Yeah, judging from your articles, he was absolutely in the right to ghost you. Okay, so let me go to let's see what's going on here. Okay, so do we have any, I'll check the super chows first. Oh, I know what happened. I stopped sharing. Apologies there, guys. I'm not on the computer that I would usually do this on. All right, so I'm going to see, oh, no super chows. Oh yeah, actually, guys, if you would like, please support us. That's at feedthebadger.com/support. And if you'd like to send us a message, you could do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. I don't see anything currently, and I do not see any super chows or super chats that I can respond Jan Newman says she's neurotic but has calmed down a bit now that she's 40. Nope. I think she's gotten worse. Now it's starting to hit her what she's lost. So take a look at here. Okay, like not one point in any of these articles have I thought, man, I would like to spend some time with this person and maybe go out to eat, enjoy their company. No. One of the things that I find remarkable is that she apparently, again, exchanged don't have sex before marriage with treat sex like nuclear disarmament. I don't see that as an improvement in terms of the shaming front, but I guess she'll do here. Tealdeer says she's failing to monkey branch, and it's going to make it everyone else's problem. Yeah, she is indeed. God. Oh, I think it's because I have two. Okay, so she's failing to. Yeah, that's probably what happened. She just enjoyed sex with her. And the funny thing is that she even said that in the first few years it was fine with her husband. So probably Mr. Sneaky Link was just in the first few years of the honeymoon period, and she probably would have been bored of him eventually too. That's what this really sounds like, especially with the opening of the relationship. It sounds like she got sexually bored. And I'm not exactly sure where the religious trauma comes in, because it doesn't sound like she ever made choices based on her religion. Like, I understand questioning your ethical construct, like your morals and your principles, and maybe changing them. But shouldn't you adhere to the ones that you have currently before you do that? Like, does that make sense to anyone else? Like, if you have an ethical system that you have chosen, or even that you've been raised in, why not uphold those ethics, then question them, and then change your behavior? Because she did it differently. She just apparently flopped into violating her Christian ethics and then felt shame for it. Well, these are ethics, right? These are the standards you're being held to. You should feel shame, or at least guilt, for not upholding those standards, even if they were applied to you by somebody else. Now, I'm not saying you can't change that. You can't be like, oh, I'm gonna engage in casual sex and enjoy having relationships with lots of different men. I mean, you can do that, and you can change your principles based on that. But shouldn't you uphold the principles you have before you, and then change them, and then change your behavior? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm just a lunatic when it comes to stuff like that. But it feels like she never had a sense that these principles were legitimate, because she was always violating them. Like, she had this standard, don't have sex before marriage, which she 100% did and then felt guilty about. Well, duh. Like, it almost feels like she can't have any kind of standard. And then the other thing is that she doesn't even hold herself to the standard of understanding casual sex. Like, she says, oh, I want casual sex. And then she has articles about men, or a article about how men aren't committing. Okay, but you were pursuing the ethics and the principles of casual sex now, which means you don't hold on to your partner. You don't have these relationship expectations of your partner. You just accept them for the moment, man. You live with the energy, with the vibe, right? You can't even do that because you don't have any principles. You don't have any standards. You just have whatever you want. Just like you pursued this guy who tried to dump you multiple times to marriage, and then you lost interest in him a couple of years in, and he managed to last it out. Guys, this guy managed to last it out like a decade and a half before he lost his mind with this woman, and then said, we got to do something. Somebody suggested an open marriage. She's on a new cock. And I would guess the only reason he allowed this is because he assumed that he would be able to pursue a sexual relationship with his wife, right? That this would result in him being able to have a sexual relationship with his wife. That wouldn't end. Anyway, so she's on a new man in that I don't know, 4 or 5 year honeymoon period that she apparently has. Stops having sex with him, and then he ends the relationship. Thank God. Thank God he finally figured it out. And hopefully, since he's in his early 40s, he can do better. Maybe he can get himself a 20-year-old. Good Lord. I don't know. Yeah, Tilder says, but remember, guys, just go to church and meet a good Christian girl and your life will be great. Wow. Her only ethical standard is whatever feels good to her. Right? Okay? She wants to have a relationship, but she doesn't want to have the responsibilities of help, like being intimate with her partner, being sexually intimate with her partner. She wants casual sex because that doesn't have the responsibilities, but she still wants the man that she's having casual sex to have committed sex with her. Okay, somebody says medium, aka the L's women post poet. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he took out the trash eventually. All right, let's see what else. Virgin recycler versus Chad trash enjoyer. Okay. Yeah, she's mid 40s. It's not going to get much better. And she's not honest with herself. She's not honest about the real problem. She's blaming it on religion. She's blaming it on her husband. She's probably blaming it on Pookie now. When it, in fact, it is her inability to actually hold herself to any kind of standard. Like if you want to be a casual sex enjoyer, you can't expect committed sex from your partner. And if you want to be a committed sex enjoyer, you can't expect casual sex from your partner. All right. So anyway, I think that's good. My cat has indicated that maybe it's time. It is time. She's going to go after my cords, which means that I may only have seconds left to live. And all right. So let me just double check. See if I can get into Discord. Oh, Vexerum the Vein. Would you go away? $16. How is this even possible? I don't know. How is any of this even possible? But that's probably what, this is the least Christian marriage I've ever. Okay. So for 6 years, they shacked up. They got married in the 6-year mark. They had an open. At what point did this relationship even passingly resemble Christian? Like what? And yet I think it's the whole religious trauma thing is the new it, you know what I mean? It's the new enthusiastic consent. It's the new violating my own consent. It's the new way of being a victim. And yeah, I'm actually boggled that how her female relationship counselor told her husband to get his own therapist and like not to stop having therapy with her, but that he needed his own therapist. I can only imagine what this woman was like in those therapy sessions. I wonder if she fainted several times. The therapist had like a pen. It could be a shiv. She could be wanting to murder me. Hyperventilating in the therapist's bathroom. Okay, anyway. All right. So once again, if you want to support the show, feedthebadger.com/support. I gotta close it out because my cat is going to destroy everything shortly. And if you want to send me a comment and a tip, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justtip. I suppose I should check. Okay, don't bite me. Be nice. Be a nice girl. I'll check to see if there's any new support. This will definitely take. Oh yeah, this is not going to happen. To try it in. For whatever reason, my Safari browser does not want to open. I'm not usually on this computer, so everything is a little bit ad hoc at the moment. Here we go. Come on, open up. Here we go. Hopefully this will do it. Sorry, I just want to make sure I give all the thank yous. I do have a thank you to give to OKFS, I think. You have a confusing name, sorry. But very much appreciated. Oh, wait. It is Yeah. OKFS. Thank you, OKFS. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Let's see if there's any. He gave $250. So very much appreciated. As of the beginning of this, we had 615 left. Oh, okay. And Anonymous gives us 500, so thank you. So now we have 115 left for the month. I can't believe I didn't know what the heck that was. I didn't even know what the heck that was until yesterday, that it was saying flush with cash. Okay. All right. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Very much appreciated. Craig Furness says, pleasure without conscience is on Mahatma Gandhi's list of evils. Well, pleasure without holding yourself to any standard. Like, honestly, if you're going to pursue casual sex, then don't expect committed sex from your partners. And if you want commitment, then you have to recognize that there are certain things that come with it. And I'm not saying that if you're unable, if you have trauma, those things are not what I'm talking about. But an effort should be made. And sounds like she didn't. Sounds like they opened her marriage. She got excited. She started having sex with her husband again and her sneaky link. And then she decided that she just stopped with her husband for whatever reason. Because the knife that she saw in the kitchen. She's like, oh, he's a serial killer. Ugh. Anyway. Okay. Once again, feedthebadger.com/support to support us. Feedthebadger.com/just-a-tip to send us a message and tip. And I will, oh yeah, that's right. I cannot send this to Brian because Brian is not hosting. So like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and share because sharing is caring. All right, I'm going to call it a day. I hope you enjoyed this insanity.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.